There you go. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay. All right. I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes to get on. While we're waiting, I have just a couple housekeeping things that I want to touch base on. So there's a chat to the right of your screen, I believe, and you are welcome to use that if you have any questions or concerns for me. At the end of this presentation, I will have my information on there, so if you need to reach out, you're welcome to do that. And at this point, we'll just go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be talking about making sense of the sensory system, developing an understanding of the sensory system, its impact on function, and how to help your child or loved one achieve their max potential. So a little bit about me. My name is Liz Reckers. I'm an occupational therapist. I graduated in 2012 from the University of Missouri. I have been practicing in a variety of different settings. I currently focus on school-based OT. I work with kiddos from preschool all the way through high school. I really focus on helping basically children be the best version of themselves and their occupation at the time, which is being a student, but also developing social skills, learning how to play with others, listen to their teachers, and the sensory system definitely impacts their ability to do this. I've worked in a lot of other settings as well. I do first steps, home health. I work private practice, doing more feeding therapy. So I kind of have my hands in a lot of different pots. But really, as an occupational therapist, my focus is to help maximize an individual's potential, doing their occupation of whatever it is in their moment in life. So that can be anything from their daily activities, like getting dressed, waking up in the morning, to a specific task that they're needing to acquire, or a skill that they're needing to acquire or relearn. I have a big passion for inspiring others, educating, and honestly, teaching others to advocate for themselves, but also giving them the tools so that they know what to advocate for. I have been married to my amazing husband for almost 11 years now. We have 3 beautiful children, ages 8, 5, and almost 3. And with each of my children, I have evolved in my parenting style, but also my understanding of how our sensory system really does impact not only the children, but how we parent them. So, yeah. So today I'm going to focus on teaching you a couple different things: developing a basic understanding of the 8 sensory systems, understanding how each sensory system can be impacted by the environment, identifying the difference between over and under responsiveness, understanding how to support your child or loved one process sensory information, and understanding how to support yourself as a parent or caregiver. Again, at the end, I will be, I'll have a slide with my information on it. You're welcome to reach out to me. I actually love collaborating with people and helping people problem solve. Hopefully we can discuss that later. And again, if you have any questions or concerns during the session or webinar, you're welcome to use the chat box to, pop those questions over there. Don't be shy. All right, so first we're going to talk about the 8 sensory systems. There's the basic 5 that everyone pretty much knows about, but then there's an additional 3 that I'll go into a little bit later that really kind of help kiddos better understand how their body functions within that environment. So the other thing I want to note is that when you're thinking of the sensory system, you might identify yourself as part of being over responsive or under responsive, or you might, think of another child or individual that you know of that you can relate those things to. When we're processing sensory information, everyone's different. So trying to keep an open mind and never judging that child or whomever it might be for their response to that situation. when we process information is that brain body connection. So, whenever you are reacting to a certain sense, that is determining how you're going to feel in that moment. And we'll talk about that later on. So there's a variety of different sensory profiles, but the most common ones that I see both in the school setting and the clinic, in day-to-day life, are the sensory sensitive individuals and the sensory seekers. So I kind of like to think of it as like this cup theory, whereas our sensory sensitive individuals have a smaller cup that can be easily overflowed with sensory information. They can respond to that sensory information through behaviors or shutting down. It just depends on the individual. But oftentimes when you're thinking of sensitive, think of that small cup and being overflowed easily. When I'm talking about sensory seekers, these are kind of our sensory cravers. They have a large cup and they're like, bring it on. I need the more information, the better. They're often seeking or engaging in movement, touch, sound, taste, whatever they can get so that they can better process the environment that they're living in. So the first sensory system we're going to talk about is vision. So it seems pretty simple. It's basically, our sight, our ability to, our eyes collecting the information within our environment. This can impact things of like how we're scanning, locating an object, reading, visually attending to a task, coordinating eye movements, like whenever we're playing catch. So if you're thinking of a child in a classroom setting, for example, trying to process where's the schedule for the day versus what's being written on the board versus a bird flying by this, the window, a friend playing with a pencil that you're attending to. These different things, or our eyes are constantly taking in this information, and our brain is having to process what's important, what's not important. So our seekers, they may prefer the bright lights, the colors, the patterns. Having a room like that might not be overstimulating for them. It might be how they function. They often do benefit from things like visual timers or color coding, labels. These type of things help narrow in their attention, but it also helps them focus sometimes. Our sensory sensitive kiddos, these are the kiddos when they wake up first thing in the morning, they're shutting down because the lights are too bright. When they go outside, they might not have as much of a tolerance to stay outside longer because it's too bright. So they might benefit from putting hats or sunglasses on. In the school setting, the sensory sensitive kiddos, they might have, but they might benefit from highlighting an area or decreasing the amount of work that they're given. So whenever they're looking at a page and there's all these instructions and all these words on them, that might create their brain to just shut down and say, kind of like a fight or flight. I can't do this. I know for myself as an adult, when I walk into my house and there's toys here, stuff on the counter, there's just stuff everywhere, my brain has a hard time processing, like, what do I do first? And sometimes even as adults, we can fall into these different categories, and it can definitely impact how we react or the mood that we're in. So definitely can impact all of us. So some different activities that you can do to help alert the visual system, whether it be to kind of bring more attention to it, or for those sensory seekers who are just needing more input, I Spy games, flashlight tag, sensory jars, bright fluorescent lights. These are going to be great to kind of wake up that system and help it kind of engage better with the environment, versus some calming activities for those sensitive kiddos. Like I said earlier, sunglasses for outdoors, limiting the visual clutter, using the wide brim hats. Lava lamps can kind of be, depending on the individual and, their mood or whatever it might be, that also might be a calming one. Because if you're thinking of it, it's the slow movement of the wave of the lava lamp going up and down. And honestly, depending on the individual, the reason I have these slides for alerting versus calming is so that you can kind of see what in their toolbox is beneficial to them. So I talk about a toolbox as in like creating a toolkit for each individual to create ideas for how they can advocate for themselves in the moment. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but just kind of being aware of this is how these slides are set up. The next system is hearing. So this is basically detecting the sounds within our environment and determining, are they calming, alerting, safe, dangerous? It can definitely impact our ability to listen, communicate, and socially engage. So when you're considering the auditory system, you want to be considering the pitch, the volume, the intensity. These can all factor in. Our sensory seekers, they might need higher volumes and pitch to process information. They're the ones that might want the louder the better. They can take in all the different noises that are going on in the hallway and still focus in on what the teacher's saying. They might need multiple prompts to comprehend and process what is being said, but that can also potentially be due to something called auditory processing disorder, where sounds are a little bit more muffled, or someone says, hang your coat on the rack, and they go grab a hat, or who knows. They just aren't quite understanding what is being said to them. Sensitive kiddos, they might go into fight or flight with those loud noises, and they can easily be overwhelmed. So again, thinking of that cups theory, they have a smaller cup and it can be easily overflowed with noises. They often will prefer quiet environments, and they might respond negatively to a specific tone of voice being used. So I don't know if you've ever worked with someone, whether it be an adult or a child, and you'll simply just say, go hang your coat up. And by simply saying that, they might feel like, whoa, why are you so intense and abrupt, versus, can you hang your coat up? The way every child or individual interprets information is different. So always being aware of what works and doesn't work. Also, you'll see a lot of kiddos in the different settings, or even adults again, where they have the noise reducing headphones. Oftentimes these are our sensory sensitive kiddos that just kind of need things to be quieter and more reduced noise. So some alerting activities can be music, musical instruments, whistling, the bop it, listening for that command and then responding to it. Sometimes that cause and effect of the sound puzzles, or even using sound machines. These can all be kind of alerting and kind of waking up that sensory system so that they can engage more effectively with their environment. Calming music can also be very calming when used. Usually you're wanting the intensity to be lower, the volume to be lower, the pitch is lower, and then for thinking of like a nice quiet rain that's a consistent trickling of the sprinkles or whatever it might be, that's going to be calming versus the random bursts of lightning coming in. Noise canceling headphones are really beneficial, and again, using that short, direct sentences is how these children often will respond better. The olfactory system is smell. So basically our body's ability to process smells and determine if they are preferred or not preferred. Our smell can definitely highly impact our food preferences, and they're very related to memories and taste. So for example, when you think of the sense of smell, you can oftentimes think of a moment in time where you walked into a space and you thought it was either pleasant or unpleasant. For example, I walk into, my basement garage, and if I smell gasoline, I'm going to think that's danger. I need to walk away. Versus, my husband might walk into our basement garage and I'll say, what's that smell? He has no clue he doesn't even acknowledge that it's there. Those are often our seekers. Our cravers are the people who crave various smells or are highly able to detect they actually struggle with differentiating between safe and dangerous. So our cravers are oftentimes those kiddos who will, they see a strawberry, they smell a strawberry marker, and they will naturally put it in their mouth because it's hard to differentiate between edible and non-edible. Our sensitive kiddos or adults, such as myself, have heightened smell sense. So I'm the one that walks in and can sense that there's something off. Whereas, and that can impact my, gag response, and oftentimes even impact meal times. So I'll go to the next slide and it'll make a little bit more sense. So one of the things that you can, when it comes to the olfactory system and that ability to smell, is you can kind of oftentimes associate it with a memory. You can associate it with, as your childhood growing up. For example, my mom is a Filipina, and in the Philippines, they always eat this really delicious fish, but it has the eyes and the mouth and the head and everything still on it. So every time I smell fish, I naturally think of that memory and honestly how I did not like the smell of it. And so it took me a long time into my adulthood before I was even willing to try fish. So it can definitely impact how you engage or participate in a task, especially at mealtime. In that same breath, when you walk into an environment and you think of, you can smell a certain thing, it'll either bring you joy or it can maybe make your stomach turn. So our sensory sensitive kiddos, this can definitely impact their day-to-day life. If their classroom is near their lunchroom and they don't like the smell of the meal that day, it can kind of set their mood and change it for the worst, knowing, almost like anticipating, oh, I'm going to have to go to lunch today. I'm not going to feel good. I'm not going to like it. So that can definitely impact the behavior. In addition, there's the sensory seekers who we have to be aware of what we're putting in front of them because of that sense of smell. So just always kind of being aware of that. All right, the gustatory system. So this is that sense of taste. So there's different categories for taste. There's sweet, sour, bitter, salty. Sometimes we think of this and we break it down. What are you in the mood for? What are you craving? But you also have to consider the textures and temperature. Textures like smooth, lumpy, crunchy, chewy, or temperatures like warm, cold, cool, or even hot. It can definitely obviously impact our eating habits. It can be closely related to the olfactory system, like I had mentioned, but again, it can also be related to the tactile or touch system. So our sensory seekers, these are the ones that are going to explore orally and struggle with impulse control possibly. So these might be the kiddos that are just stuffing it in their mouth. They want more. They bring it on like they can't process slowing down and just enjoying and, being in the moment and chewing their food. They may mouth non-food items, like I had mentioned earlier, because that strawberry marker smells delicious. So I want to taste it. I want to embrace it. You have to be kind of more aware of what you're putting in front of them. The sensory sensitive individuals, when it comes to taste, oftentimes may be selective eaters. They might gag on their food or the textures. They might avoid soft foods or mushy foods. And sometimes even the day-to-day activity of brushing their teeth can be a big challenge. So depending on the individual, these activities might be calming or alerting. But if you're trying to increase that awareness of taste so that you can explore more, you might try some crunchy or chewy foods. Or even sometimes if your body's kind of feeling tired, sometimes I oftentimes will tell kids, grab something crunchy or chewy or some nice cold water. Those type of things will help kind of awaken the system. Oftentimes chewing gum will even help with focus during a task. These are the kiddos who oftentimes, if you're doing alerting things, you can even combine some of the textures and tastes to really kind of increase that awareness. Some calming activities that you can use while also engaging the taste or gustatory system is sucking on ice or popsicle. So that suction, that oral is going to naturally kind of create some of that calming effect. And then also drinking through a straw, like applesauce or pudding, will also kind of create that double factor of calming, but also working on some oral motor skills too. All right, the tactile system. So this is the one I feel like is often talked about because it did definitely impact a lot of different areas of life. So it is detected through the receptors of the skin, and it helps individuals determine the purpose and safety of the touch, whether it's preferred or not preferred. It can be light touch, deep touch, the texture. Sometimes this can be, especially for clothing. Vibration is another version, and pain. So these different types of touch can help a child calm. It can also cause excitement or alertness, and it can tell our brain whether we need to go into fight or flight or we're A-okay. So this is one I know as an adult I hear a lot about, and honestly embrace a lot, of the touched out concept, where we are, it's almost like, think of a mosquito flying on and like landing on your arm, and you naturally just want to like go into this response of hitting it away. Sometimes when we're constantly touched by children, or even like just always engulfed by different touches, soft, hard, rough housing, it's overwhelming. And so our sensory seekers, they have a very high tolerance for this. So again, they have that large cup, like, bring it on. I need all the movement and touch. They'll probably seek out opportunities, in fact. But they also might have poor awareness of that hygiene of, like, when their face is dirty or hands are dirty. And then our sensory sensitive kiddos, these are the ones where they might get to that touched out concept, where they have a limited tolerance for various textures on their clothing or in their environment. They don't like touch. Some kids don't even like to be touched at all, even a simple just hand on the shoulder. It kind of throws them into that fight or flight, meaning I'm not safe, I need to shut down. They oftentimes don't even like their hands or face getting dirty, which can also impact what foods they might prefer to eat or not eat. So whenever we're talking about touch, there's different things you can try to do to alert the system. So for those seekers, opportunities to give them more input. You can do touch and feel books, finger paint, sand play, splashing in water, tickle play. These type of things are going to be ways that they can engage more in their environment. Whereas those kiddos who are more sensitive and they, are easily overwhelmed, things like brushing, there's an entire protocol on it, but sometimes I like to use it. It's like a little scrub brush, and you basically just you can just play with the pressure. You can go hard, you can go soft, you can go fast, you can go slow. Just helping them really kind of desensitize that, whether it be their hands or their feet or their whole body. Joint compressions is another way to improve tolerance for touch. So those kiddos who can't tolerate any touch at all, giving them that slow, prolonged pressure is beneficial. Same with a weighted blanket. Sometimes that pressure, again, it's consistent. It's not like abrupt, making you want to go into that fight or flight. It's going to be a lot more calming. When you're thinking of for yourself as an adult, and when you're feeling touched out and such, instead of getting those quick hugs from the kids or like tapping here and there, asking for a big bear hug instead, where you can have that prolonged touch and then walk away. That sometimes does help. All right, so that was basically a summary of the main 5 sensory systems. The next 3 I'll be talking about are a little bit more in depth and might focus more on the child's awareness of self. So proprioception is basically your body's awareness and understanding of how the body is positioned within the environment. The receptors are in your joints and your muscles, and they are awoken or stimulated by different movements like pulling and pushing, lifting, hanging, or overall pressure. So they kind of tell you how hard or soft the force is. Oftentimes when I go to a playground or take my kids to the park, or I'm constantly using my analytical brain, thinking of all the different, how they're getting all that proprioceptive input. They're climbing across the monkey bars. They're balancing on a random, thing. They're, trying to climb a tree. They're trying different things of just kind of getting an awareness of where their body's at in space. Are they going up? They're going down, these are the type of things that help kids develop that coordination. It can definitely impact their focus and attention or sitting tolerance in a school setting. It can impact social skills, like whenever they're standing in line, do they understand that they're too close or they're too far away from the peer in front of them? It can impact arousal level and play during daily activities, like even getting up out of bed and getting dressed, understanding how to balance on one leg so they can pull their pants up or put their pants on. Again, the level of force tolerated during these activities and body awareness really can impact the daily, like even the morning routine alone. So seekers, they may want the more the better. The higher the impact helps them understand their environment and engage better. Sensory sensitive kiddos, they may prefer the lower impact activities. They're not going to be the ones that are going to naturally go over and try to jump on the trampoline intensely. They might even be, concerned about how to even get on an uneven surface. So for the sensory seekers, oftentimes these are the things that benefit them to help them understand where their body's at in space and develop a better awareness for that intensity that they're putting out. So pulling and pushing a wagon or heavy objects, or even doing a pulling and pushing, like putting hands up and their hands on your hands and pushing together. So you're pushing hard or you're pushing soft, or one's pushing more than the other and they're moving back and forth in space. Sometimes that is a simple activity that can kind of help them understand that level of variation that they're giving. Trampolines, are they jumping hard? Are they jumping soft? Giving those inputs of giving them labels to what their body is doing in that moment helps them understand better. Hopscotch, climbing on playground equipment. Again, that chewing crunchy or chewy foods is also beneficial in this moment too, because it kind of helps them get that, even, we have receptors in our jaw even to understand the pressure needed to chew. If you do have a kiddo who has a hard time sitting in place and, getting their body in check, sometimes putting a foot band on a chair so they have something to push those feet against, sometimes tapping their feet will be helpful, but giving that resistance, always kind of thinking of proprioception as a resistance and understanding that. Now for the sensory sensitive kiddos, sometimes giving those bear hugs of understanding this is deep pressure, this is soft pressure, but varying it to their level of comfort. Sometimes push-ups can also be helpful. Push-ups, again, it's like a prolonged, consistent push so they can process what they're able to tolerate. Yoga poses are another way to help them understand. A lot of the sensory sensitive kiddos might be our clumsy kiddos, where they don't fully understand what their body's able to do. So when we say, try a random yoga pose, they're going to have no awareness of, what my legs are doing versus my arms and being able to coordinate that. So they might need a little bit more input. Swimming is a great way to help engage the full body, because that pressure of the water on all of our joints and muscles is going to be very calming and also good input. All right, our vestibular system. So the vestibular system is basically movement. So think of sensory receptors that are in our inner ear that help us determine the direction and speed of what we're doing. So are we going in circles? Are we going back and forth? Are we going fast? Are we going slow? It can definitely impact balance, posture, coordination. When our head is moving, fluid is moving in our ears, and it helps determine like where we're at in space, so we can understand, are we lying on our bellies? Are we rolling over? In that same breath, whenever you're moving, if you're wanting to focus on awareness of yourself in space, if you're going in a circular motion, that's going to be very alerting. If you're going linear or back and forth, that's going to be very calming. So our seekers, they may want to seek out opportunities for that circular motion, that fast intensity. That might just help them feel more grounded or alert. So oftentimes, if you think of those wigglers in the classroom who are constantly moving back and forth or rocking, that's honestly sometimes a child's way of trying to keep themselves awake and alert so that they can pay attention. So oftentimes whenever we're telling our kiddos to sit still, that it's kind of a coping mechanism. So kind of giving them that grace in the moment. In addition, we have our sensory sensitive kiddos. They may avoid any sensory opportunities like the swings or slides or trampolines because they just don't feel grounded or stable in their space. Movement sometimes can make them feel unsafe or like they're at risk. They can easily become overwhelmed, and it can also impact negatively, like they'll complain of headaches or stomach aches. Think of yourself in a vehicle, especially for myself. I oftentimes will try to drive because if I'm in the passenger seat and I'm going down a road, we're going somewhere, and I'm having to turn around and having to parent my kids or help them, get them whatever they need to have, my vestibular system is just completely out of whack. It makes me feel either car sick or honestly just puts me in a bad mood. So, just often being aware of the why. Why has their mood changed, or why are they acting a certain way? Kind of breaking down those sensory systems and processing okay, well, there's this factor and this factor. Okay, well, maybe they're just feeling overwhelmed. That cup is just overflowing. So to alert the system, again, alerting trampoline, swinging, dancing, spinning, somersaults, anything that's really kind of getting them moving in different direction. The direction, the speed, the intensity, the duration, or how long it lasts can all impact the vestibular system and really all the systems. But also can also differentiate between whether it's a calming activity for a child or an alerting activity. Again, calming is going to be more of that linear movement. So think of whenever you're putting a baby to sleep and you're kind of going back and forth, or even side to side. It's a very calming motion. So things like a rocking chair, a hammock, even going on a scooter board, but only going back and forth, swinging, those are all going to be calming depending on the individual. And then the last sense we're going to talk about is our internal sense, or interoception. So this is our sense of what our body is feeling. The receptors are in our brain, or the receptors are located throughout our body. So like our skin, our muscles, our organ, our brains. It helps us determine our emotions and what our body is needing in that moment. So it can be, helping us understand hunger versus thirst, pain versus ill. I'm tired versus I need to go to the bathroom. My stomach hurts, so maybe, it could be, differentiating those feelings. It can also be things like excitement, anger, calm, frustration. So it's really just that understanding of what we're feeling and how our bodies respond and what that means for our body. and our emotions. So kind of think of it as like we have receptors in our body, our brain's processing that, and it basically tells us what we need in that moment. So some examples are, your muscles in your face are tight, your heart is beating really fast, your breathing is really fast and loud. That might be anger, or it might be even excitement. It just kind of depends on the individual. I actually had a patient one time, and she is such a awesome kid, and she is so intelligent. But for the longest time, she had a lot of anxiety and fear over different scenarios. And then the more we worked together, the more that she realized that sometimes her what she thought was anxiousness was actually excitement. So kind of helping kids understand, what their body is feeling in that moment and how their body is reacting. Other things could be like, whenever, instead of going up to a child and saying, "Oh, you look tired," well, what does that mean? My interpretation of what their body's doing might not be accurate. So, but you can say things like, "Your eyes look heavy, your muscles," and they'll say, "Oh, my muscles are tired, and check my heart. Oh, it's kind of moving slow. Maybe I am tired." Or even whenever we're like potty training our children, and we're trying to teach, like, it's not when I think you need to go to the bathroom, it's when your body is telling you need to use the restroom. So, your lower belly might feel like it's full. Muscles might feel tight and you kind of have this wiggly dance. Likely your body's telling you it's time to go try to sit on the potty. So trying to use those words and teaching our children what their body is doing rather than telling them. So for individuals who have poor interoception, this can definitely impact their ability to understand their bodily needs. Like I said earlier, anxiety versus excitement, needing to use the restroom versus feeling hungry, and a poor ability to advocate those needs. So again, they might be, I don't know about you, but if I get hungry, I am a very grumpy human being. And that's truly just my body's way of reacting to the fact that I'm hungry and I'm not feeding into that actual need in that moment. Difficulty regulating emotions is often common as well, because they just don't understand what they're needing in that moment. So, kiddos who are tired, sometimes they'll amp it up. We call it slap happy, but honestly, that's their body's way of trying to move faster so that they don't actually have to put their head on the pillow and wind down for the night. So the goal of promoting this sense is basically to help the individual make connections between their body and their emotions so that they can help develop a comfortable inner self and advocate for themselves better. So oftentimes what I'll try to do with kiddos when I'm working with them on interoception type skills is I'll try to tell them, is this I like it or I don't like it. And kind of giving it that verbiage will also help. So let me go back to this one for a quick minute. If you want to learn more on interoception, because it's an entire multitude of information, I would highly recommend Kelly Mahler. She is kind of the pro on this and where I've learned a lot of my research from. So feel free to, you can drop your information in the chat box, or again, you can always email me individually and I can send you more information on this. Okay, so how to support your child processing all of the sensory information that we just went over. So one of the things you can do is create a sensory diet. So think of it as kind of sensory opportunities throughout the day, every 2 to 3 hours or so, lasting 3 to 5 minutes. And it might be, longer or shorter depending on the individual, but you can kind of take things from each of those categories on the slides provided, the alerting versus the calming, and helping them create that awareness of what's working and not working, in those moments where, maybe their visual system's overloaded, but their proprioceptive system is completely underregulated. They need more input to understand. So kind of figuring out which ones work for that individual to honestly maximize their potential and engagement in that task or whatever they're needing to do in the moment. Um, Co-regulation is one of the most important things I think we can all do. So basically, that just means be the example. So instead of telling our kids or whomever we're working with to breathe, and then we're yelling at them, breathe, calm down, that's not going to help anyone, or telling them they're fine. They're obviously not fine because they're having a reaction to whether, who knows what it might be. Being a problem solver in that moment, but just kind of meeting them where they're at and showing them, I'm going to take my big breath. You're going to take your big breath. I'm not going to elevate to your, level of frustration, because I know that we're both needing you to get to that, what I call the green zone or the calm zone. I do this often with my almost 3-year-old. I've been doing it for over a year now. And, when he's having a moment where he's just feeling all the feelings, he's overwhelmed or whatever it might be, instead of telling him to calm down, I just simply regulate and take my big breath. And then he will, now it's almost to the point where he does the exact same thing. And then he can, most of the time, calm enough to be able to speak what he needs in that moment. Another tool you can do is create a toolkit for your child or yourself, helping them understand what does and does not work for them. So kind of giving them words to use in that moment, like, I don't like this because, or my body feels busy, I need a fidget. I don't like when you hug too deep, so I need space. Giving words to it can be a toolkit, or simply giving visuals of, like, I need, these are options that you liked, that you said you like, some fresh air, some movement, you want, you want your weighted lap pad, whatever it might be, to help them regulate in that moment. And then most importantly, be their advocate. So one thing that I always like to say to people, because it's often asked, is it sensory or is it behavior? Well, honestly, every behavior is because of sensory. So sensory is behavior. You are feeling overwhelmed because of, maybe it's things we're processing in our brain, but it also might be it's too loud in our environment. There's too much visual clutter. I'm touched out, there's all different factors. So being aware that we don't need to quickly in that moment, because I can't tell you what you're feeling, and just like you can't tell me what I'm feeling. So helping give our children and our loved ones, whomever it might be, the words to use in that moment, and just advocating what we're needing. I need space. I need a deep pressure hug instead of the random, hey, how you doing slap, if that makes any sense at all. And then how to support yourself as the caregiver. As adults, I've mentioned it throughout this entire session, but basically we can become overwhelmed and dysregulated just as our children can. So even creating your own toolkit of options is incredibly important. Self-care and self-awareness is talked about a lot right now, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Simply just getting some fresh air, or using different scents in your environment. Maybe it's that alerting sense of the lemon and citrus, or it's the calming scent of the lavender. Using meditation or a calm space where you can just kind of desensitize and just quiet your nervous system. Giving yourself opportunities to go socialize and, engage in more auditory stimulation, just different things to basically make sure, because if we're going to co-regulate with our children or our loved ones, we have to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves first. So, that being said, this is my contact information. This is my personal email. You are welcome to email me at any point in time. I see private individuals at Covenant Chiropractic and Wellness for various things, specifically for sensory or primitive reflex integration, also for feeding therapy and oral motor. So if you have any specific questions regarding sensory, I would be happy to either give you my best answer, or help connect you with some good research that's out there. So We have a little bit of time. If anyone has any questions or concerns, feel free to add it into the chat box. If you want specific information on anything in particular that maybe you know of, a case you can think of, I'd be happy to try to, problem solve that with you right now. But I guess at the end of the day, the most important thing I can say is to just be aware of, if you have a child who you can kind of see in these different categories. The whole point of this webinar is to help you kind of be your own detective. So that's basically that's my superpower as an occupational therapist, is to kind of help be that detective for individuals. So I can figure out, is it what's overwhelming them, or what's creating that over responsiveness and creating them to be kind of more highly sensitive, versus what is creating them to be under responsive and needing that deep pressure or environment. So a couple more minutes and then I'll go ahead and close out. Someone asked, what can help when your child likes to bite a lot? I've purchased necklaces that are meant for it, but they aren't holding up. Confirmed no dental issues. So oftentimes there's a lot of reasons why a child might bite. But honestly, more than likely, I've found that they're just trying to seek oral input. So sometimes, honestly, just trying to give them more awareness on their face, tapping around their face, or even giving them like a little, brushing, tactile touch on the inside, or that vibration, honestly, is usually beneficial too, depending on the age of your child. They have different things on the market, but I will sometimes just use an electric toothbrush. Now, that being said, sometimes electric toothbrushes are too intense. So when you're thinking of that intensity, you want to be just aware of that. But, sometimes even taking a toothbrush and just kind of like brushing their tongue fast or brushing their tongue slow, or just kind of giving them that different things. Sometimes, you can play with different temperatures as well, like, giving them something cold to kind of mouth on versus something warm to mouth on. It can kind of just kind of playing with that sensory system a little bit, if that makes any sense. And Kate, if you want to drop your, or even email me, I'd be happy to send you some other ideas and maybe problem solve with you as well. Yeah, hopefully it helps. Another thing that I have come in contact with a lot, especially with my first steps kiddos and the younger ages, in the preschool even, when they're oftentimes mouthing or biting on things. Sometimes it's a discomfort. It's their way of, whether they're in the teething phase or maybe even a dental issue, depending on the individual. They will be seeking that input because they're trying to either calm it or they're trying to engage more. So if you think of babies are always putting things in their mouth because it's the first form of exploring their environment. It's like kind of the only thing that they really have control over. And so they're constantly just exploring that way, whether it's the tastes or the feel or the texture. So whenever kids will be biting a lot, oftentimes it's their response to their lack of communication. So depending on if it's like an aggressive biting towards others or just simply like mouthing on items, trying to figure out, like, is it their version of trying to communicate, or is it truly them trying to seek that oral input, if that makes any sense. All right. So I'm going to wrap up for the day, but if you guys, again, please feel free to email me. I love being a detective with whomever I can. And if, there's some red flags that I'm seeing that maybe needs a little bit more insight and one-on-one attention, you are always welcome to call the clinic and schedule an appointment with me. So Thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a great day.